like poison, poison. Poison, poison to me. Poison, poison. Oh, what are you doing to me? What are you doing to me?
Yeah, you got it mostly right. Akshay.
Wow, it didn't unmute on YouTube still. I'm very rusty at this. Welcome, YouTube viewers, to our panel. There are a couple rules, of course there are. Just use Slido to ask and upvote the questions, as you know. Set your Discord username as your Slido name. If you want to ask a question on stage, just say so in your question or in the chat. And I'll invite you up on stage to talk. And this is a professional type of development event, so school rules, that type of thing. But before we get started, I actually do have one announcement, and that is our next speaker, because I did say this was going to be a series. Our next speaker has been confirmed to be the one and only Biaji, head coach of Titan Turtles. And that is coming to you live Sunday, June 14th at 7 o'clock. So we'll be going over some strategies, maybe some tips and tricks. They did win CyberPatriot Season 19 in the Open Division this past year, so lots of interesting stuff to see from him. But for now, we have Hypernova with us, and the goose spawned... the goose did spawn a window. I set the time at like 20 minutes, so it'll happen every now and again. Yeah, let's just kind of jump into it. Our top question right now from the one and only Ethan is, have you become one with Linux yet?
Low-key, I'm kind of a fraud when it comes to Linux. I was a Linux main back when I competed in CyberPatriot, and then I was also the Linux lead for our CCDC team once I originally joined. But basically, everyone else who I've ever competed with got better than me at using Linux. I still don't. I still avoid using Vim, so I don't think I'm one with Linux yet. I'm just. But I use it when I need it, like for development and stuff.
That does make sense. The year of the Linux desktop has been a meme for quite some time, and it people are saying it is coming now with Bazite, but actually, I'm gonna jump the gun with a question of my own here. Do you think that the year of the Linux desktop is actually upon us with all the stuff that's going on with Bazite and Valve, the gaming community getting into it?
I mean, as long as I can play like video games on Linux, I think it's low-key worth switching. But realistically, it's just all about getting it to the point where like quote unquote normies can interact with it and feel like they're empowered enough to use it and it's not scary, right? And most of the things, like I think like some of the other stuff we'll talk about today comes down to like reducing barrier of entry. And so as long as Linux can reduce barrier to entry, I think it'll keep growing, and it could become the decade of the Linux desktop. Like,
Yeah, I hope it does. And oh my god, everybody is now on the screen. Look at that. But yeah, I think barrier is definitely a real risk, because like you go to Walmart and every single laptop there, not made by Apple, is running Windows, and that's just what people are so used to. But yeah, we'll definitely see if it has better adoption coming in the next little while. Marcus answer. There we go. All right. With 4 upvotes, we got Planetarian. How did you go about getting other members of your club to practice or be dedicated to learning in general?
for the most part, I don't really think that you can just force people to practice or be dedicated to learning. I think for the most part, it has to come intrinsically in some way or another. whether that's like wanting to win a competition or just like you think that the stuff you're doing is pretty cool. So while you can't really do anything to force them to learn or like put in the same amount of effort as you, there are general leadership principles that always help. For example, like setting an example. If like your teammates or the people you're leading don't really see you putting in a lot of effort, it's hard for them to put in a lot of effort at the same time. I think one underrated part of it is also if you want to make like the thing you're doing attractive to other people, you want to show that it leads to results, it leads to success, whatever that may be. So for example, like if you're able to land like your first internship because of doing your cyber competitions or whatnot, it makes it a lot easier for other people to hop on board and kind of adopt what you're doing. Or I mean, I don't know, if you grinded really hard for a competition and like your strategy succeeded and things worked out, that is another example of things working out. So as long as you can show results of what you're doing, I think people will naturally flock to something like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I know in my experience with my cyber club, the big draw or the big pitch was always the free trip to nationals. That is a huge carrot to put in front of them because they need to put in the work to be able to get there. So a lot of them do kind of come in with certain expectations about how things might go, but it doesn't really pan out that way all the time. So how would you say you deal with people who, or how did you deal with people in the club who maybe weren't on the same playing field as some of the other members and weren't able to make it to nationals? And how did you kind of make sure that they didn't take that personally and try and quit, or they took that in stride and kept going?
So like in terms of CyberPatriot, I think I remember it was hard to get people to realize like, oh, just because you don't make it to nationals, that's not the end all be all. I think that I did my best whenever we had like practices as a club, or even the practice machines I made, to show off like a bunch of different aspects of cyber, because one of the issues with CyberPatriot I noticed was it kind of makes cybersecurity look a lot simpler than it actually is. Like a lot of people who grew up doing CyberPatriot really think that cybersecurity is just like configuring like Apache to like disable some or enable some kind of security setting, and that's what cybersecurity is all about. But it's quite more than that. And so I tried to focus like practice machines I made. I tried to incorporate like AppSec vulnerabilities and mention CTFs when I went through those practice machines, and the forensics. I would try to incorporate like a lot of different aspects. Like I remember, this is an example from my club specifically, but from when I built that Nevermore machine that some of you guys might have done, I added like a reverse engineering question in there, just to show that there's more to cyber than just CyberPatriot. And even if you don't make it in nationals, or like you don't even like CyberPatriot, I think there's a lot more in security that is there to do. And I think there's definitely some examples from my club that I can mention that went on to, maybe they didn't make it in nationals a bunch of times, but like they're working at great places doing cyber right now, or they're winning like major CTFs and stuff like that. So I think it's just important to show people that CyberPatriot isn't cybersecurity.
Yeah, it's a pretty all around learning experience when it comes to technology. Definitely, definitely, definitely. From falling as a three-time Cyber Patriot national champion, what do you think contributed most to your success?
Um, uh, I mean, number one thing, I think I was pretty obsessed with winning. I'm not really sure why, but
Relatable.
that
Definitely relatable.
I, that was all I really cared about. So that definitely helps. A lot of people do say like hard work like beats talent or whatever, but I think obsession beats hard work as well. If you really do care like a lot, um, like you are going to beat pretty much everyone else who doesn't care as much, or eventually you will at least. But the point I was trying to make is that uh, because I was obsessed, one thing you can learn about a lot of these like competitions, and I figured it out with CCDC as well, that they're mostly formulaic in some way, shape, or form. So you have to be kind of analytical about it. I realized like pretty quickly with CyberPatriot that like trying to just like go through every like stig possible, or every security baseline possible was not the best way to win. And it would like burn me out. It was like really hard to do. But like figuring out like, oh yeah, there's like a pattern to this. Like every time I compete, like the only times I find new vulnerabilities is like when they're different, when the config files like I read through this random config file, I noticed that like something doesn't look correct, and that's how I found a vuln. Or like I went through this file system and I saw this binary that doesn't look right. Oh, let me just like remove it, and I got points. Right, so that's where I kind of figured out. Oh yeah, baselining is probably the best way to go. Like it always seems like every time I find something new, or find something that helps me out, it's because it's something that I didn't notice before, or wouldn't have noticed if I didn't know what the right thing was. So, and this translates to CCDC as well. The competition, all these competitions are very formulaic, and you should take time to understand how the competition works, how you're scored, and the general trends, because that'll help you, figure out the strategies that'll help win you the game. Because at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's pretty much a game.
Yeah, it is one big game. Definitely one big game. The sort of the thing that, oh man, I had something I was teed up I was gonna say, but now I forgot it. Yeah, baselining is definitely definitely an important thing for CyberPatriot. Knowing what to look for and knowing what looks wrong so that you can fix it. That is definitely a core skill to have. How do you help develop that skill? Because a lot of people, or a lot of students that I've worked with, they kind of they don't struggle to see the pattern, but when it comes to the easier vulnerabilities, it's very formulaic and very you can have a playbook and you can follow it pretty much to a T and get a lot of points. When you get to the later rounds, there's more sort of adapting with having to not exactly, you don't really get the feedback from the scoring report and that type of thing of what you're doing. So when you get to the more advanced stage, how do you translate what you're doing on an image into an actionable thing that you can put into a baseline?
Yeah. So again, it does come back to like understanding the game very well. Um, like the equivalent to this is like in AP exams, or in like just even in your classes in high school, there's rubrics that you're graded on. And so at the end of the day, you're trying to maximize the points on the rubric, right? So if you go back through like all the old semifinals or state round, or just go back through every round competitions, and you go look at the vulnerability categories and you see how they change over time, you'll notice that certain vulnerability categories decrease and certain ones increase, and then you can see what types of vulnerabilities are associated with them. And then you can like quickly tell that there's like a pattern to this. Like uncats always increase as you get to semifinals. Local policies tend to increase as well, but then like user auditing shrinks. I think it's AppSec is the category. AppSec always increases by a lot once you get to semifinals as well. So you can kind of tell what you need to focus on. So for example, if you're looking at AppSec, right, like you should install types of applications you see. So if you've been to semifinals before, and if you've been there a couple times, you've been to state round a few times, you probably noticed things like file sharing applications, or what, like web servers. And if you've seen like Apache once before, it's pretty likely that you'll see something like that again. So you might want to look into other HTTP HTTP based services like Nginx or something similar. Same thing, if you've seen file sharing services 1 or 2 times, it might be worthwhile to look into other file sharing services. Like you go from VSFTPD to Pro FTPD and then Pure FTPD and then Samba as all file sharing services. And generally, if you can extrapolate the pattern from experiencing like a single season or experiencing a few, like practice machines, and kind of figure out like where else can you improve. I think it's called a spider graph, where like you have different like areas of which you're good at and which you're bad at, and which you've just kind of unexplored. And if you can like fill out that whole spider diagram, that like hexagonal diagram that you see in video games, you have a much better chance at like adapting to whatever comes your way. So for example, again, like if you know that there's gonna be more AppSec phones, take your time to like install like a bunch of various services, and then grab their at the very least their default config file so you can compare it to the one in competition and see what's different.
Yeah, definitely home labbing, or not even home labbing, but just like making stuff in VMs definitely helped me a lot for sure. On top of just running stuff in a home network and seeing if you can harden it, secure it, get your parents to start using it. That was a fun one. But yeah, moving on. How have you, if at all, this is from Alex Cantor, how have you, if at all, leveraged your experiences from CyberPatriot or CCDC in interviews?
Yeah, I mean, both of those have been very helpful for my interviews. I pretty much can, like, every single like internship or job I've gotten, I can really like it's basically only because of CCDC or CyberPatriot. I've rarely been asked about my degree or my classes in interviews before, but essentially, I like talking about what I did. A lot of the hands-on stuff you do is not common for a lot of other students. Cybersecurity is really niche. You might like if you're in high school and you're in like the CyberPatriot Discord all the time, you might think a lot of other people are doing this kind of stuff, but basically nobody is. Like if you go to the real world, you'll notice that no one's doing cyber. So and a lot of the people who do get cybersecurity internships have never done cybersecurity before. At the most they might have been like they might have done like the Google cybersecurity certificate, but the point is that a lot of the people getting matched to these kinds of jobs don't really have that kind of experience. So you immediately talking about the experiences you've had from CyberPatriot and CCDC will help you stand out. But the most important things that I've noticed from either of these is general technologies. So for example, if you use Active Directory before, you don't want to mention that you use Active Directory. Like you can say Active Directory, but the more important idea there, and especially if you're translating stuff you've done in comps to resume value, is like, for example, Active Directory is just an identity management solution, which is like an entire subset of cybersecurity on its own. But if you can explain, oh yeah, I managed identity, I managed making sure users, were following principle of least privilege, taking like these abstract cybersecurity topics and understanding how to connect with your competition experience, stuff that just might seem like, oh yeah, this is how I get points, like making sure a user isn't admin. It's actually like a whole field in and of itself. Now it's a lot more complex than what we do, but the idea is that you have a foot in the door already. So like doing stuff like that will definitely get you ahead. Also, I like talking about decision making a lot in my interviews, especially when it comes to CCDC, where you're defending a network against like live adversaries. So talking about like risk management, which is really just, oh yeah, wait, which box do I secure first? Which vulnerability is more important for me to secure? That's risk management, that's vulnerability management. Again, very abstract topics, entire subsets of cybersecurity, but I can talk about them within the context of something that is easy to understand, like a few like 5 like servers that are all connected to each other to have different vulnerabilities. So I kind of rambled there, but the point is that you can take the stuff that you did. A lot of the impressive stuff is like individual bits you wouldn't think are impressive, and individual decisions you make that actually do map to real subfields of cybersecurity. Like again, I direct you to identity. risk management to like CCDC, ensuring which machines get fixed first, um, stuff like that. I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, I definitely used CyberPatriot as a key point in my interviews, and it it is definitely a good talking point. It definitely gets asked about quite a bit because, as you say, yeah, nobody is doing this, and that comes into a great question from the Discord chat. I'm only picking him because he's BAG. Actually, don't know how to pronounce that. BAG? BAG? Maybe he can answer that. But what's the best way to introduce cybersecurity to new students? Because, yeah, nobody is doing this. How do we get more people interested in cyber?
So from my experience, and so I can talk about this from the perspective as a member of my cybersecurity club at my university. Everyone who comes into CS is very like sweet coded, if that makes sense. They're all like very interested in the general path for people who do CS, which is software engineering, or even like at the most like IT stuff, or sweet adjacent things like DevOps and infrastructure. So a lot of people come in with the misconception that cybersecurity is really hard, and that it's like a level above like programming by itself. Like a lot of the time, people will come up to me and be like, "Okay, do I need to know C++ or Python before starting cyber?" And like, you really don't need to know any of that. So what I like to do a lot in our like introductory workshops or the way we teach cyber at my university club is taking really difficult topics and are things that seem very intimidating and breaking them down to the point where someone who's not super experienced with technology or not super experienced with cybersecurity can understand. For example, we did a password cracking workshop one time, and like it sounds really cool, but it's not really that impressive. Really, that we just showed them, like what the idea of a hash is, and people understood that pretty quickly. And once we explained what hashing was, we were able to say, okay, use this tool and like use these commands and crack this hash. And like it was kind of Mickey Mouse. Like we kind of gave them the commands to use and whatnot, but it looked cool because they were doing it on a terminal, and then they found a password out of nowhere, out of stuff that seemed random. And so I think the cool factor is the best part. I think making people get outcomes without a high barrier to entry is very important. So there was basically no barrier to entry. We provided the VMs. We provided a cheat sheet on how to use like Hashcat, and we did a bunch of demos before they had to do it themselves. And the challenges that they were given in this presentation were not huge jumps in critical thinking. Like they were small jumps of critical thinking needed to get to the next point, but it was mostly similar to what they had already learned. So in that way, it felt like they were putting in the intellectual effort to get the outcome they wanted, and they were doing something cool at the same time, which just made cybersecurity more attractive to them. And that helped us, and structuring our workshops in this way helped us to improve retention, and get people more interested to the point where they're doing actually cool stuff, and then they get the brain rot too, and then the cycle continues.
Yeah, the brain rot does get real after a little while, that is for sure. Oh, here comes the goose again. Thanks. From Moron, I presume this is a joke question, but I'm going to spin it into a real one. Why is Windows better than Linux? But there are some real reasons that people might want to use Windows in an infrastructure aspect, not so much on the desktop side, but on the server side. There are good reasons why people would want to use Windows over Linux. And a lot of people might not really understand the reasons why, because Windows Server is a little clunky. Nobody uses IIS anymore, so for websites it's kind of useless. How do you think Windows fits into the enterprise and into infrastructure as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious answer is Active Directory, right? Like that software has basically it's an all-in-one software that does, as we mentioned, identity management, and it does it really well, especially when integrating with other Windows machines. So the number two thing that supports the reason why Windows is used in enterprise is because of its ease of use. Like if you're a normal person, if you're a normie, using Windows is pretty easy. It's not super hard. It's very easy to use, and because of Active Directory, the way it's so easy for like sysadmins and people who do work with Active Directory to slot in like a Windows machine into a domain and then control it and make sure users can't do anything they're not supposed to, or push out updates or push out software, makes Windows the ideal choice for enterprise environments. Um, yeah, and like the fact that there's like also like a lot of software that does work with Windows helps a lot as well. So like people, pretty much anyone, like a developer can use Windows, but also a graphic designer can too, to the with pretty much the same efficiency, and they can all be and all both of their machines can be managed by one sysadmin running Active Directory. Um, so yeah, it like logically makes sense for enterprise.
Yeah, absolutely. My entire home lab is actually Windows Server and Active Directory, and while it was a pain in the butt to set up, I feel like it probably would have been more of a pain of a butt if I did it with Linux. Sorry, Linux guys in the chat. But yeah, it's worked great for me, so I assume it's been working great in infrastructure as well. I'm gonna jump to falling here just because I want to get as many people in as possible. What role do you think AI plays in CyberPatriot and CCDC, both before the competition in research and scripting and during?
Um, so I was almost pretty much done with CyberPatriot by the time like ChatGPT was like making the rounds. But from my understanding, I think in CyberPatriot it could definitely help a lot with threat modeling, certain like applications. For example, like if you're in competition and you've given like a service you've never seen before, I really think like you can ask AI, what are the common pitfalls with the service? Where might there be vulnerabilities? What are common misconfigurations? And you immediately get like a sense of what to look for and where to look. In the same way, I think it's really useful for debugging. Um, if it has more domain expertise than you and something you've never seen before, I mean, it's going to have more expertise than you if you've never seen something before. So it might be able to help you debug, which is always better. Before the competition, again, research would be super useful. Again, how we mentioned earlier, like if I wanted to look at HTTP-based services, I can just, go to ChatGPT, or I like to use Gemini now, but I could go to Gemini and ask it, okay, give me other, services that are used at the same scale as like Apache 2, that are open source and can easily be installed and self-hosted, and it will give me Nginx and whatever other web proxies exist. So yeah, in CCDC, I've seen it used pretty extensively. It's pretty cool. Both red teams and blue teams use it as a force multiplier in a sense. For example, I've seen teams use it to write scripts on the spot where they need to delete like a beacon from like multiple machines, or need to change multiple machines at the same time, but they have to do like some complex like command to do it. They'll just ask AI to write the script and then send it out. I've seen AI used to actually complete tasks. So like you might tell it, oh, SSH onto the server and do these things, and it might do that for you. I've seen it used as a pair programmer in the sense of debugging. So teams will use it when a service is down and they don't know how to fix it. So they'll have Cloud Code come in and SSH in and check it out with them too. I've seen teams build custom tooling around it. So I think the UCI team last year, what they did was they had, or I guess this past season, what they did was they had an MCP server that Claude would connect to. And the MCP server was connected to their internal inventory, where they inventoried all the services and the firewall configurations and stuff. And so Claude was able to use that to get a quick understanding of what various systems were working as. And it was able to fill it out further with more detail once it got the IPs and stuff from that like inventory app that they were using. So really, again, it's been a force multiplier. I've seen red teams use it to build uh, I think the national CCDC red team used it a lot to build out their tooling. They built out a lot of custom tooling for the national CCDC event, and a lot of it was using Claude. Like if you go back and look at those repos, like have the commits survive Claude, and they use it to again automate like re-entry into systems or poking around and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely a force multiplier for sure.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, with all the stuff I'm seeing in the news these days about Anthropic's new cybersecurity AI stuff, and now OpenAI has just come out and announced Daybreak as well. So it's only gonna get worse and or better from here, 100%. Just personally curious, it's kind of off topic, but did you ever get a chance to check out OpenClaw or any of those personal AI assistants?
I never used it. I've talked to people who've used it, and I've like read about it. Um, the idea seems cool. Seems like a lot of people downloaded it without really understanding what it was, and I was kind of surprised to see how much like malicious skills and stuff were being pushed to public repos as well. I think it was like a big social experiment. I'm not gonna lie. It's cool though, I guess.
Yeah, I kind of agree. There was a lot of hype around it for about 2 weeks, and now nobody's talking about it anymore. So I guess that kind of goes to show how useful it really was.
I will say though, I think it did usher in a lot of interesting dialogue about agentic identities. So a lot of like big tech cybersecurity companies and even like, and cybersecurity consulting companies have really all been all in on agentic identities. So I think at NVIDIA right now they're piloting some kind of thing where uh, every employee has also an agent identity associated with them with its own email and its own access. And there's a lot of
Oh
questions on
wow.
how do you do identity management, but with agents, like what can they access? Should they be able to access everything the human can? Less, more, like what specific functions? I think Meta is working on something like that too, where they're dealing with how to figure out how to manage agentic identities and like non-human identities is what they call it. So it did spark a lot of interesting conversation and a lot of um, interesting work in that sense. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. It did spawn a lot of very important conversations about that thing. That's crazy to hear out of NVIDIA, but I mean, I'm not surprised. It is NVIDIA. Um, yeah, that is a very interesting problem to solve, and that is a very interesting thing to do. Man, give everybody their own AI agent as an employee. That's kind of, huh. Yeah, sorry, I'm just like, eventually, if the agent is as good as the employee or better, then you just fire the employee and you still have the agent, and then you don't have to pay the agent. That's man, it's coming. It's coming. It is coming. How do you attract students to your team initially that will put in the time? From Alex Cantor.
Um, Accolade, you attract them with what other people have been able to achieve. So it'll get exponentially easier the more success you gain. But from the start, you want to talk about how it's helped others. So what I did when I was recruiting for my CCVC team last year was I went on LinkedIn and I searched up pretty much every single like big tech or big cybersecurity company like Palo Alto or CrowdStrike or I would go through the rosters of different CCDC teams and I would like scour like the internet for their LinkedIn's and I would find out where they were working. And turns out a lot of them were working at great companies and like it's kind of like everyone says this, but the job market and also people come to campuses and universities looking to gain the skills they need for getting a job afterwards or getting work. And the more attractive of a job you can offer them, the better. So what I did was I got a bunch of screenshots of a bunch of people who were in some of the top teams, and I got their LinkedIn's and I put them all in one slide. And I was like, if we win, this could happen to you. You know what I mean? So That helped a lot. And then eventually, when we started winning stuff, the trophies and like the idea of like going on trips, fully paid. There were some people on my team who had never been out of the state before, and so that was like really cool for them. Getting to compete with the team, I heard, was a lot of like reasoning why people join. A lot of people, when they come to a campus initially, want community, especially at university where like you don't come in with a lot of friends. We would, like advertise that like the whole CCDC team became friends, and the entire CCDC team is also friends with the alumni of the CCDC team, and it's kind of like a fam system in that kind of way. So yeah, a lot of that. I think community and also what's in it for you is usually what we talk about. We also talk about resume value. We mentioned like a bunch of buzzwords with technology and stuff, and we also talk about where our alumni have landed post competition. So yeah.
Yeah, 100%. It always comes back down to the resume items for sure. Because, the majority of people graduating high school have, the same few things. They did AP, they did IB. Those are very impressive things for sure, but having that cyber on there is definitely a really good boost if you're trying to go into that industry. From Lolme now, has CyberPatriot and or CCDC truly helped you build skills for future jobs? Has it helped you land a job?
Yeah. When I interviewed for Microsoft a couple years ago, uh, I had talked a lot about my CCDC experience. And it was funny because the guy who was interviewing me told me that he quit CCDC because he thought it was too hard. So there's definitely, a lot of people, um, like in the industry, know what this is. I think there is a bit of a skewed perspective from high school students who, like put Cyber Patriot and cybersecurity on their college apps, and they feel like it didn't like help them as much as they thought it would, or like isn't helping them now. I promise you, it will matter more later when you're actually in the industry, and a lot of the alumni or people who are involved in organizing or just adjacent to people who are organizing these competitions are the people hiring you. So like once you get into this domain specific area, like yeah, CyberPatriot and CCDC will help you a lot. um Again, as I mentioned earlier, like CyberPatriot and CCDC are very uh like isolated competitions, for lack of a better word, like pretty contrived in some sense. Like in the real world, you're never gonna like actively defend against an attacker, like reverting your machine while they like attack your box and take down services. And you're not gonna configure like an Apache server to be secure. But the point isn't that. The point is that you're learning the underlying IT skills needed for Cyber Patriot. So like networking is a big thing that a lot of people don't know coming into this kind of stuff. Learning to use the CLI is a big thing that people don't know when they need to actually use like real tooling or build actual tooling. Like that's super important. Understanding again the principles that you don't realize you're learning, but you actually are. So when you're like demoting users to like from an admin to a user, you're exercising principle of least privilege. When you're making sure that you're putting servers behind the firewall, you're exercising like not exactly, but exercising network segmentation, which is another big principle of cybersecurity. When I don't know, like you changing default credentials or making sure everyone has unique passwords, you're inherently reinforcing these basic principles that you don't understand right now, but like normal people don't think about this kind of stuff. Like software engineers will just leave API keys wherever. They're good. The software engineers don't really understand like the risks behind not having input validation, or using libraries that they don't like know where those libraries came from. But the mindset that you build from doing these competitions will make you maybe it'll make you paranoid, but it'll also make you trust things less, which is really good like as a security engineer. And it'll make you think outside of the box. Like a lot of the questions I've been asked in interviews are like scenario based questions where it's like, oh yeah, what would you do if this happened to you, or what would you do, like how would you imagine like this attack surface could be attacked. I draw a lot of the ideas I bring to those interviews from competitions I've done. While it might not be one to one, again, it's the principles that matter.
Yeah, absolutely. CyberPatriot does teach a lot of good principles when it comes to technology as a whole, including cybersecurity. And I can't speak to CCDC, but did you ever happen to do Skills USA by chance when you were in high school?
No, but I've heard a lot about it.
Yeah, because I was gonna say that one was one that really helped me a lot in my interviews because they tended to focus more on the real world kind of tasks that were involved with skills. Um, but yeah, Cyber Patriot is definitely an asset as well. Ethan would be a good one to ask. He went to nationals at Skills USA. Let's see here. From Stage King, how would you learn your primary OS and how would you relearn it if you had to start back from square one?
So I remember like I learned Linux mainly through just doing practice machines. Our club had a lot of internal ones, which was, at the time, like there weren't. I don't even think there was a good scoring, and I think ACUS didn't exist at the time I started. So, like, yeah, it definitely didn't exist. And so, like, a lot of them were internally through or whatever, like our Bash scoring engine that our club had. So I learned a lot through that. But I would also just create like my own VM and like install stuff and like try doing stuff on my own, like when I would test scripts and stuff like that, test playbooks to see if what I was doing like would actually work or wouldn't break the machine. Um, so that was definitely it. I think that for a long time, I lacked true understanding of how the operating system worked and how, you know, like I would notice that this proc directory wasn't normal, but I never really took the time to think about what that actually meant or what it meant for it to not be normal, like how it actually worked. So if I had to do things again, I would definitely um, follow my curiosity or like follow um, like observations I made about things being weird. Maybe if I spend more time, maybe if I Googled things, the instant I observed them, I would have learned a lot more, a lot quicker. Um, but at the end of the day, I do think that having a lot of experiences and doing things over and over again will eventually lead you to coverage as well. But yeah, if I had to do one more thing, I would follow my observations.
Absolutely. Great insight. And it kind of leads into a question that I put in here, but nobody upvoted, unfortunately. But it is related, so I will get to it. How did you first get into cyber tech, and how did that evolve into joining Cyber Patriot? So when you were first learning all this stuff, how did it kind of start off?
My first experience with cybersecurity was, I think, in sixth grade, where I was really into the Transformer movies as a kid, and I would watch the movies. I would pirate them off of 123movies.net, and turns out like I didn't know it at the time, but it installed a bunch of adware onto my machine. It got super slow, and there were just ads everywhere, and it was really bad. And so me and my dad, I remember, like sat down one afternoon to try and fix it. We installed like three different antiviruses and whatnot, and none of doing any of that, like none of that got rid of the adware. And eventually, at the factory reset it. I think that was my first introduction into cyber, and that was the first time and Cyber Patriot was the first time I realized that like doing computer stuff is not all about programming. As a kid, I was really like, I wasn't like I wasn't like a nerd, but like I was like a little bit tech savvy. You know what I mean? Like when the when like the teacher needed me to open a PDF or needed someone to open a PDF or like play a YouTube video, like I would usually be the one to raise my hand to help. Um, but I always thought that programming was what cybersecurity or like what computers was all about. So like my peers would be coding up games or websites, and I didn't really feel the same kind of satisfaction they were. So I didn't really think tech was for me. But then I visited my like high school cybersecurity club, and I noticed that there's more to this than just you know building things. You can actually fix or break things too. So that's kind of how I got started.
That's awesome. That is an awesome story with the adware. That was definitely me as well in the very early days, just torrenting trying to dodge malware. I'm sure that was a shared experience for everyone here. Hands up if you got your start doing Minecraft mods. That was also another big one for a lot of techies that I know. From Chronicles, how can I improve my CyberPatriot skills after completing all of the practice images? I'm struggling to score above 70 points in the Linux semifinals.
I would take the time to understand what categories you're missing. Once you figure out the categories, it's basically a measure of coverage from there. So if you're missing AppSec, it's basically because like you were not finding the vulnerabilities with whatever critical service was involved, right? You should also like actually read up on like that critical service, for example. You should install it yourself. And that way you'll notice things that like you may have not noticed before. Like not all vulnerabilities for your like LAMP stack running WordPress is gonna be like within the Apache MySQL and PHP config files, right? There could be like malicious, or like for example, like the WordPress config file exists too. Like the website itself might have vulnerabilities, the code in it, right? So stuff like that, you won't really notice the full attack surface until you actually try using it yourself or explore it yourself. Um, so I would say that if it's something like uh, local policies, you kind of know where to start with that if you've gone local security policy points before. You kind of know that, like for example, on Windows, like it's probably a lot of GPO stuff. There's a lot of existing like MS baselines for like GPO security. There's a lot of hardening scripts online that do certain things for certain reasons. So you can look into those. Um, and yeah, so again, it's all about coverage based on the remaining categories. I think that's just the universal thing. Every like person who did well in CyberPatriot can tell you.
Yeah, 100%. You really don't know, like if you don't have those skills, you don't really know what you're looking for. And I was kind of in that position myself just a few weeks ago, because of course I'm washed. On my home lab, I installed a Kali box and I installed OpenVOS, what it is called now. Greenbone OpenVOS, I forget. But I installed it and I had it scan my network, and it found like a big laundry list of 10.0 CVEs, and I was like, what the heck? Because I set up everything decently secure, I thought. But actually looking at the logs of what it output, I was kind of shocked to see some actual vulnerabilities in my network, and it just kind of goes to show that, yeah, what you're looking at, even though you think it might be secure, yeah, definitely might not be. Let's see here. From Moron again, how to get a job. I know that is a slur for some people, but like going into an interview, how do you position yourself for success? How do you sort of format your resume? Not, you don't have to get into crazy specifics, but in the cyber industry, what do they generally look for when you're going into your first interview?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the resume really quick. Resume, I just use a basic template that everyone uses. So if you go online, you Google Jake's resume. That's the main engineering one that a lot of like software engineers and like security engineers use. So you find that template, you download it, and you fill it out with your information. The important thing about that stuff is just to make sure it gets scanned by ATS, which is like the automated scanning system a lot of these jobs use, or like job sites use to extract your data. Um, you can ask like Gemini or ChatGPT to read your resume and extract all the data it can and see where it gets stuff right and wrong. If you want to test it for real, you go apply to some job and try to fill it out with your resume. And if it fills it out like pretty well, like pretty accurately into all the text boxes, then you're doing a good job and it's getting parsed properly. If not, you need to do some kind of tweaking to make sure that your resume is getting parsed properly. Again, I would recommend using like LaTeX or some kind of pre-existing template that would you have more control over in terms of it getting extracted out well and all the metadata you know remaining in place. Going into interviews, you definitely want to understand like who you're talking to. So if they tell you beforehand like who you're interviewing with, stalk them on LinkedIn, understand what they do, come up with interesting questions about their domain. For example, if they work in like offensive security, one thing that's all like I love to ask people who do that is like how do you decide which targets to go after and when? Because that's like a existential problem um, in like OffSec because you have a lot of attack surface and you don't know where to go, right? Like which things are the most important. You have to decide. And every team has a different way they decide things. Like some teams, they use like an AI to do a prelim assessment on a service to see how vulnerable it is, and they do that on all the services, and they figure out which one to go after first. Other times, they have requests from certain teams, certain like software engineering teams to look at their service before they go live, right? So questions that are interesting related to their domain expertise is always really good. Um, then the next thing I like to do is I always open up with that story I just told you guys about, like not being super into like programming as a kid. Um, Turns out a lot of cybersecurity people felt the same way, and a lot of people's road to getting into cyber was pretty non-traditional. Since again, it is a pretty niche field. So always sharing your story and where people can quickly understand where you're coming from um, will help you. Thought processes out loud. So a lot of the times in my interviews, I've gotten questions completely wrong, or questions like that didn't make sense. But I did give my thought process um, and like supplementary information about what I knew for sure when answering things, and that always helped me out. I remember I got asked a question one time about how like the like a TCP handshake works, and I had no idea. But I explained like I do know why like TCP has like has a three-step handshake, but UDP doesn't, and like that was able to get me through that interview because at least I understood like supplementary reasoning of why things exist. What you'll notice is that people are much more willing to take a chance on someone who might not be the most technically gifted, but they're able to articulate their thoughts well, and have their principles down. Which is like I personally think I'm not like the most technical. I'm definitely not the most technical person I know. A lot of the people like I'm surrounded with outshine me in that aspect of they're way more technical, or they're way more involved or like deep into like one specific aspect of cyber. I think where my strengths are is that I'm pretty broad, and I like in terms of my knowledge set, and I can articulate things pretty well and understand where principles from one domain may spill over into another, and vice versa. So yeah, go prepared into job interviews. Know who you're talking to. I like to read blogs and podcasts that the company's security team or the company's engineering team in general has done beforehand. Um, and yeah, like talk out your thought process. If you know your stuff, then make sure they know that you know your stuff. You know what I mean? Like even if you don't remember like a small detail, that doesn't mean you don't know what you're talking about. That just means you don't know that small detail.
Yeah, that's true. It does come back down to principles all the time, especially in the workforce. Um, I was also quizzed on certain concepts like the TCP handshake. Maybe not exactly the TCP handshake, but similar stuff. And yeah, freezing up is definitely never fun, but you just kind of go with the flow. Let's do Maya here. Have you ever coached / mentored a team? If so, how did you assist them? I'm going to add on my own little bit here. What goes into being a good mentor or coach?
So I never really did that for CyberPatriot, but most recently I did do that for my CSDC team. Since I didn't compete this year, I took a step back, but I was still actively mentoring and helping. And I definitely like, could have. There's a lot of things that went into this, but I can explain generally. Uh, I think you have to understand where the team is like headed and the assumptions they're making. So a lot of common pitfalls I see with teams is they assume uh, a lot of things. For example, they'll go into a competition or go into their training, assuming that certain things are always going to hold true, or like certain things because they've never been a problem in the past won't be a problem again, or that they'll figure something out when really it could be a massive pitfall. So I think one of my strengths when I've led my old cybersecurity teams was like being very paranoid about various pitfalls. Like, oh yeah, if this changes, like how would our team react? Or if this like major um you know like concept that we compete with, or this assumption that we have, like for example, I don't know, that we're never going to get XYZ as a service because it doesn't make any sense, so it's like a paid software. What do we do if that gets turned up on its head? Or if the networking is configured in this way that we didn't expect, like what do we do? So I think a lot of what will help your team if you mentor them is understanding where they're at and what could make or break, or not really make break, the assumptions that they have about the competition and the way they're preparing their strategy, and poke holes into it. You're gonna seem like a bad guy when you do that, but at the end of the day, the more important thing is making sure your team is ready to face whatever they need to. Um, Technical mentorship is not really the main problem. You don't need to be like super technical to mentor. What you just need to understand is the gaps the team has, and as long as you can convince like individual members to learn on their own, it should be fine. Like if you can convince them, oh yeah, this is a real problem that we need to deal with. Again, as I mentioned, like the assumptions thing. As long as you can convince them, and that's the case, then yeah, I think it'll be fine.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can speak from experience there. It is not so much the technical part, even though as well, I guess only Avril would know that here, but my title when I was still with my high school doing mentorship was technical mentor, but it was less of a technical job. It was more just concept. Yeah, have them kind of guide them, but yeah, absolutely. Kind of losing my train of thought all the time here. Let's see. Let's get two questions in at once here because they're kind of related. What jobs or processes do you believe LLMs will largely replace in cybersecurity? Will cybersecurity be entirely replaced by AI? And do you think it's possible to get a job in cybersecurity in the near future?
Um, First of all, it's very possible to get a job in the near future, no matter what. Um, CrowdStrike stock crashed when Mythos and Project Glasswing was announced. Um, I don't think it was when it was announced, but it was when it was leaked. And the funny thing is, people don't really understand that cybersecurity is more than just like AppSec, right? Like, um, Mythos works. Mythos is like an insane piece of technology, and it's kind of insane. It's crazy, like that it can find those vulnerabilities. But it also costs a lot of money, and it requires like full access to the source code to do that. Which makes sense for the problem it's solving. And we probably we couldn't do that like a long time ago. But all that means is that it's again a force multiplier for bad actors. Um, Now, because of all these open source projects, people, bad actors who can get their hands on strong models or develop agentic systems that can simulate these, really powerful models, have already been and will continue to, find vulnerabilities in open source software or implement vulnerabilities into open source software, or, vibe code like deployment scripts, or quickly, use Claude to have, vibe code like aggressor scripts on their beacons and stuff like that. So I think that attackers will improve with AI, and at the same time, you're going to need defenders to improve with AI. I don't think LLMs will replace jobs in cybersecurity. I do think that some jobs might be a little bit more risk than others, like vuln researchers, for example, who specialize in finding vulnerabilities in software. But, like, for example, if you're a normal security engineer, you're building security solutions, or you're implementing security solutions at scale. You're building detections, you're threat modeling surfaces. Um, it's too much context for AI to handle, and especially in the near future, like LLMs won't be able to do any of that. Um, it's an arms race between the attackers and defenders right now, and AI is just like another tool in that. So as both of them scale up, I don't think like I can't speak for 20 years down the line, but I think in the near future, like there's nothing to worry about, and it's a great niche to get into right now. Any CS like uh, field is always more secure, like in terms of job security, when you have a specialization, and cybersecurity is no different. Um, so regardless, you should definitely get into cyber and you'll get a job.
Yeah, it definitely does come down to the specialization, because it is kind of a meme, or was kind of a meme, that if you're going for a CS degree, then you're kind of signing up to burn your money in a furnace. But yeah, having a good specialty like cybersecurity can influence your success a lot. I have gone ahead and closed the Slido now, so new questions are not being accepted because I want to be mindful of the time. Are you good to keep going through the rest of these 7 questions, or?
Yeah, I'm good to go.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, how do you simulate RBV scenarios for falling?
So luckily, my university, we have a lot of infrastructure set up, which means we have like a Proxmox server, which is our hypervisor that we run our VMs on. We have all the networking and stuff set up to the point where we can, like if we need to, we can build up like cyber ranges and then do RBB scenarios on them, where we have both red team and blue team, connect to the same network as these machines, and then can interact with them in whichever way they choose via like remoting protocols like SSH and RDP, or whatever attacks or whatever the protocols there are. I think the less talked about thing with a lot of RBB scenarios is the architecture and the planning that goes into them. So you want to be mindful that like the environment you're building is actually useful to you. And the environment that you're building is very dependent on the goals it has. For example, if you're building a CCDC environment, it's an active defense competition, which means you're trying to fix as many vulnerabilities as you possibly can, and red team is trying to get in as quickly as you can, which means it's not going to be something like a hack the box machine, which is a very specific wind the attack path. Because blue team could fix that, or like reduce the attack surface of that very easily. They could implement a firewall in front of that machine, and like half your attack vectors won't work, and you'd have to pivot into a different machine on that network, then jump to it. So active defense competition tend to have a lot of low-hanging fruit vulnerabilities all spread around for blue teams to struggle to create sweeping fixes to fix all of them, while red team gets a field day to get in, but blue team is like has underlying access to those machines, so they have an advantage in that sense, where they can just turn things off or like fix these things very quickly, even if there's a lot of them. But then again, if you're building like an environment that's specifically for like a CTF style environment, you want to make sure your environment has very interesting attack paths that are unique and not just like copy paste, because you want people to learn, or to like have that aha moment while they're figuring it out of like, oh, this is how this is supposed to be exploited, or this is how we break something, like built this way. So yeah, a lot of it depends on your intent, and you should always aim to teach something with whatever scenario you make. Whether if you're building a CCDC environment, whether you want to teach a specific concept like secrets management, right, which is basically the idea of managing all your like API keys and passwords in one place. If all the systems on the network are using that, then that's a great teaching mechanism, where your services are dependent on the secret that they're leasing from this secrets management service, and also that secrets management service needs to be secured the right way, whether it's like through network segmentation or strong firewalls or strong protection on the service itself, security controls on the service itself. Um, because like if attackers get into that, that's like there's a lot of PII and important information that they can use to get into the rest of your network. So yeah, always the infrastructure part is important. Like have your hypervisor and be able the ability to create VMs and get a networking setup, but your intent and the thing you're teaching is very important too, or else you end up with a dud network.
Yeah, it always comes back down to the logistics and the planning of it. I ran an RVB last year, and it took literal years to get running. And that was with a team of people doing the images and that type of thing. It ended up going pretty well, but when it comes down to the infrastructure of it, a lot of clubs might not have the resources to expend for that type of thing. Are you aware of any like cloud grants or things like that educational institutions can apply for, especially at the high school level, to kind of help with that and get resources for their students?
I know most recently I know about AWS. They if your school has so what we've done is our school's IT department has a partnership with AWS, and we were able to go through them to request like a grant of like 2,000 credits, which was really useful for the CCDC team to practice like AWS environments. Admittedly, these things are kind of hard, especially with like education cuts recently in the US. But you just have to go through connections and people who might want to help you, because people do want to help others. And so if you can get to the right people and network your way through, you can get something out of it. Look into nonprofits around your area too that do like, or like even like small hacker groups or hacker meetups that like do a lot of dumpster diving, and collect things from like old data centers to build their own like home labs or environments and stuff. They might be able to help you get like some like basic infrastructure to help you get up and running. People love to help people, and so as long as you can show that you really care and you have enthusiasm, and get to the right people, you have a pretty good shot at getting something out of it, even if it's not directly infrastructure.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely procuring the infrastructure, and not doing it on cloud is a hassle, a much bigger hassle. Yeah, it was always joked about at my club that we would eventually have a full-on data center in one of the industrial buildings adjacent to the school, but maybe one day. From Ebo, I come from a small island, and I'm pretty sure our CyberPatriot team is being cancelled by STEM. How can I keep CyberPatriot here?
Yeah, so my cyber club had an issue a few years back where our lab was going to get taken away, and then so we had to come up with a way to prove that we deserve to exist there. A lot of that is like past success of alumni, um, things about like community. If you can describe like how you built a community with whatever competition or club that you have. We also partnered with like a nonprofit in the area, that was supplying us infrastructure and stuff, to show that we had like real impact in the community as well, and that we were backed by like people who like were supplying us with like actual resources and supplying students with actual learning resources, and that like like it doesn't deserve to be taken away. We partnered with research groups on campus too. So I would say like believe in the power of people, and try to prove that what you do is worthwhile with whatever you can, whether that's alumni, other nonprofits, other groups on campus, your like past results or whatever else.
Yeah, it does come down to justifying your existence pretty much, especially when it comes to teams and things being canceled by programs or school boards or schools or however it plays out. Yeah, just showing them the value in it is definitely a big factor. From Purple Aster, what's so special about Cyber Patriots and other topics relating to it that got you to commit to it?
Um, I remember one of the big things for CyberPatriot for me was the fact that there was live feedback. I think that it's very rare. I think one of the things they do hate about school is that like I don't get live feedback when I do an exam or something. I just have to wait. And it's hard for me to improve in my learning. But I think with Cyber Patriot and other competitions like that, there's like it's kind of fun to get live feedback on how you're doing and how you're competing. And I felt like I was learning in real time every time I competed, and so it made competing super fun. Also, I just think cybersecurity is cool. Uh, as like a field, it's cool, and also I think that once I got really into it, I do think it's a very noble like line of work or a line interest. Essentially, no matter where you work or whatever you're doing, you're protecting people and their assets and their capability to do other things with your skills, and so you're allowing others. You know, if you're at like a biotech company and you do cyber, you're allowing the people at those companies to save lives with the medicines and vaccines they're making while protecting their work and protecting their labs and their infrastructure to allow them to do the very best work they can. So I think it's cybersecurity itself is the way to let others go as far as they can possibly go. And so I think that's like a pretty unique field to be in.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. From Alex, what would you focus on automating if building a CCDC team from scratch? What training would or did you write or prepare for teammates new to cybersecurity?
Yeah, so one thing I found useful for CCDC was that I spent a lot of time like learning CCDC myself. So when I initially joined the team, like I wasn't part of leadership, but when I became leadership the year after, I took all the things I had learned from competing, and I spent a lot of time like figuring out like what is like if in my ideal world like what are the exact strategy I would need to win. Now again, if you're incoming freshman or something, that's kind of hard because you haven't done a cybersecurity competition before. But there's a lot of blogs and stuff, and an understanding of the competition you can get from other resources. The point is that you should figure out what you would want from an ideal CCDC comp, like what kind of enumeration and initial hardening would work best for a team and like in your ideal world. And what I found was really useful, and it's kind of like a cop out in a way, was I didn't teach cybersecurity when I was trying to get people into CCDC. We would run CCDC trainings. I would teach people CCDC. I would teach people, oh, this is how you nmap. Okay, whenever after we nmap, we always change passwords. After we do that, we always do enumeration of the services running on the machine and map them to the scoreboard. And in that way, I could get them like CCDC experience without having them without having to teach them cyber. And then I would, gradually introduce other aspects of the competition while teaching them the competition. So I'd introduce injects and I'd force them to research like cybersecurity topics on the fly. Like the inject would be like, how can we implement zero, like something stupid like zero trust on a network? And they have to Google it and learn it and describe it to me in a report on the fly. And in that way, they're learning stuff while also being put on the spot, which is honestly like what you have to do in CCDC anyway. So, um, yeah, I found being the best way to get people interested, and it's gonna require a lot from whoever it is leading the team to understand the concepts themselves and figure out where their team needs help, and then throwing that team into that environment. And so you're gonna have to be ready before you can get out of ready.
Yeah, 100%. For anyone here who might be unaware, CCDC is essentially the collegiate version of CyberPatriot. And my understanding of it is, correct me if I'm wrong, pretty much every round is like CyberPatriot Nationals, or not like CyberPatriot Nationals, but sort of a step up from CyberPatriot Nationals every single round. Would that be accurate?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's very, very high stakes and very high stress for sure. For sure. Yes, collegiate cyber defense competition. Thank you. Let's go down to Spears in here. What internships go well with CyberPatriot or CCDC? Asking as a high school junior.
Basically anything security related or even IT related. If you can get like a job, like an internship working like IT, especially like like at your age, like you're pretty young. So that kind of internships will get your foot in the door. Um, what I do want to say really quick is a misconception. I think there's a misconception a lot of people have with like Cybervision and CCDC thinking that they're like limited to help desk or IT work because they spent or like sysadmin work because they did Cybervision or CCDC. That is not the case at all. I've seen people go from CCDC to like like product security, even though they didn't like play any CTFs in between. Again, the most important thing is like what you're learning and the principles you're getting out of it. I've seen people go from CyberPatriot to software engineering. I've people go from software engineering to security engineering. These internships give you a lot of leeway, and as long as you can demonstrate you understand basic concepts, you'll be able to get into pretty much any internship you want. Now, uh, for your specific case, I would look into stuff like locally. Any honestly, anything is good like for your age, but like if you can get into IT work at your like school district or your school or like nearby like local institutions. Um, if you can like reach out to small security firms like locally or even like uh, you know across the state or in the country, you'll find out they're a lot more charitable. And even if you don't get an internship, you'll get like a lot of good advice of where you need to go or what you can learn to be ready for these kinds of internships. So just reach out as much as you can. Internships aren't really meant for people who, like, honestly aren't in their like sophomore or like maybe even freshman year of university. But you'll be surprised at how far you can go if you just ask and be involved and see what you can do.
Yeah, definitely. There are definitely a lot of opportunities out there. Um, Curious as well, would you say that your presence on LinkedIn had a significant impact on what internships you've been able to land? And do you think it'll matter going into more of a full-time industry job?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I definitely have gotten reach outs on LinkedIn a lot of times. I've seen recruiters look at my LinkedIn before as well. Um, Actually, I got my very first internship via LinkedIn. Like I
Oh, wow.
apply I was just applying to places, and then like one of the like people who worked there saw my thing, and then like DM'd me on LinkedIn about it, and I was like, oh yeah, yeah, like this is what I do. Like this is the kind of stuff I'm interested in. So yeah, definitely. I mean, it is like that's what it's meant for. It's meant for connecting you with people, and getting cool careers. And not only that, like it's a place to market yourself and your profile, but you'll also notice what a lot of other people who are in the place you want to be are doing. So, for example, I remember like before I like first interned at like any super big company like Microsoft or something like that, I spent a lot of time like again stalking LinkedIn's of people who were doing what I wanted to do. They were doing security engineering at like a large scale at a very big security company or doing cutting edge work. And I saw what they did in university, and what I noticed was they were doing competitions, they were doing research, they were doing they were building their own thing, they were like writing blogs. So I noticed all of those things. And like if you want to it's like if you want to be like the kind of be like the people who are in the spot you want to be in, you can see what they're doing on LinkedIn, what they're posting about, what they're announcing, what they're working on, and in that way you can kind of mimic them and follow in their footsteps.
Yeah, that's true. LinkedIn has been pushed for quite some time in the cyber program I was involved with, and yeah, it definitely has made a difference for me and a lot of people that I know as well. So yeah, if you're out there, get your LinkedIn profiles updated. It's people do look at that stuff, absolutely. Again from Alex, how did you find teammates out of those workshops for beginners at your cybersecurity club? If so, how did you determine which students would put in the time? What I take from that is, how do you find the needles in the haystack?
Yeah, so what I would do is I'd give very difficult challenges. After like the first few workshops, as I mentioned, right, I gave them pretty easy challenges just to get their foot in the door, but then people were staying. So I'm like, okay, you got to be committed somewhat, right? So I started making things really hard. And I saw people who like were able to handle the pressure. People came up with who like had some sense of ingenuity and came up with interesting and creative solutions on their own time. Um, or people who like tried their best to do things even if it didn't work, or they took over jobs for other people. For example, like there was one guy that I remember a couple years ago when I was running CCDC training. There were a couple people I looked at, and they came up with some pretty ingenious solutions. Like I red teamed all of them and I took all their services down, and they came up with like different ingenious ways to like fix the problem. So I brought both of them into the lab, into like our cyber lab, like a week later, and I was like, "Can you like if I give you like this topic right now, can you explain it really quick to me?" And so they spent some time like figuring it out, and then they like wrote it up on the whiteboard. And the person we ended up picking for the team was really good at explaining his thoughts, and it was kind of crazy because I noticed that he had never even done CS before, like before like university. So I was pretty surprised for him to like even understand those things. So um, what I would tell you to do is, first of all, not everyone that you're going to pick is going to be a super technical genius. The more important thing is learning potential enthusiasm. If they're willing to put in the time, if they're coming to every training, if they're staying after hours, if they're just asking you questions, that makes it very clear like they really do care. And if they have learning potential, which means that they're able to pick up on topics very quickly, that might be more useful than a teammate who's like, kind of arrogant or like thinks they know better than everyone else, even if they're more technically advanced, because the other person can just catch up if they need to. So yeah, I would say learning potential and enthusiasm.
Yes, those are two of the biggest factors. Definitely, yeah, definitely. The enthusiasm was a big one for me because um, it's you can't you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink, right? So yeah, definitely. Definitely. I don't exactly know what this means, but I left it for last just in case you do. From Moron, did you do any fun P4 things with UCOP?
No, I did not. P4 I think is their highest privacy level. Like they didn't give interns that kind of access. So no, I did not.
Nah, unlucky. All right, and that is all of the questions from Slido, but I've got one question to end us off here, and that is, if you were going to get hit by a bus tomorrow, what is the one thing that you would want people to know about how to succeed in cyber?
Um, I would say nothing matters more than passion. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I believe that hard work beats talent, but I always think passion and obsession beats all of that. Um, you'll notice that even if you do like all these random things, like one day you're like you got interested in Wireshark, but then you got bored of it, and then you like started learning like pwn stuff, like buffer overflows, and uh, like ROP chaining and stuff. You'll notice that all these things compound over time, and when you get to your first interview, or when you get to some situation, you'll notice that all these things that you learned actually do help you. Maybe not in the way you thought it would. Like you didn't have to do a buffer overflow yourself, but you told a teammate like, oh, this is possible. Like this is an issue that could exist, and you patched the vulnerability. Or you like mentioned it like haphazardly in an interview, like, oh yeah, I've done pwn stuff before, and they were looking for a guy who did that. Or like they're surprised or impressed. So again, nothing matters more than if you're interested in what you're doing. A lot of people will tell you like, oh, this is not worth your time, or cybersecurity pays less than all the sweet jobs, which is not even true. Um, and like you think you're like what you're doing, like spending all your time into CCDC or CyberPatriot like isn't going to be the most useful thing for you ever. But turns out everything, as long as you really care about it, you're really interested, it all ends up working out. And I know that's easy for me to say, but it's pretty true.
Yeah, and Avril getting that from the last question, that great quote, "Nothing matters more than passion." That is definitely very, very true, and a great way to end off our panel today. I'd like to thank you, Akshay.
Yep.
Yes, okay, I got it. thank you so much for coming on and doing this panel with us today. Very greatly appreciated. Everybody else, thank you very much for watching, listening, participating, asking the questions. I think this went really, really well. And I am really, really excited for our next panel coming up on June 14th with the one and only Bia G. Look out for that coming soon. But other than that, if you joined halfway, missed some of the questions, want to go back and check it out, the YouTube VOD will be available as soon as YouTube is done processing it. So the link will be in announcements. And everybody have yourselves a great night. Thank you very much for coming.